Guys, good to see you all.
Good to see you.
You know, I've said it, so I'm going to admit it. I am jealous. The stagecraft, and Steve, you and me and Tim have all been part of this. Patrice has been a watcher and an analyst of it. But like, they are executing brilliantly. When I watch these events, when I hear them, I'm going, okay, you guys you're doing it right, Steve.
No, absolutely. They deserve an award for what happened there, both on substance and optics, by the way. And of course, that's important. But this stagecraft, just incredible. And those of us who do messaging and communications for a living couldn't help but smile. But even more importantly, of course, than that wonderful imagery of all those young female athletes surrounding the president at his desk. Even more wonderful than that is the reality that girls' sports throughout the country are going to be protected. It's insane that we have to do this, but the point is we do, because the radical left got so out of control, particularly when Joe Biden was in that Oval Office, that girls' sports were being invaded and women and girls were being abused in this country. There are, of course, entirely sensible, logical, historical reasons that we separate men's and women's sports. That's going to happen again. And to your point too, Sean, you mentioned the NCAA. Just how quickly they buckled. Now, the NCAA is not a MAGA organization. It's not a Trumpy place. But here's the point. When you show leadership and resolve, when you make a persuasive argument, and when you can say legitimately, we have the backing of the American people because we just want to mandate election, promising to do this. When that confluence of factors comes together, guess what? Even folks who may not be with you ideologically, they pretty quickly get in line. I would use as a corollary to this, in a related topic, a lot of these hospitals around the country who, under the guise of care, in quotes, have been mutilating the private parts of children. They have also said, we're stopping this. We're stopping this in places like Boston and Chicago and Los Angeles because of the executive orders of President Trump. So on these, and I think the related issues, right, I would call them sort of generally sex confusion. On these sex confusion issues, President Trump is President Promise Keeper, number one. But number two, he's showing the kind of leadership that has real, tangible results that accompany wonderful imagery.
Yeah. Patrice, how happy are you guys at the Independent Women's Forum? I mean, I watched, it was funny. Randomly, yesterday, I'm downtown, and right place, right time, I watch this group of young women and girls come out and head over to the White House. And obviously, I didn't know who it was, but then I saw Riley Gaines, and I'm like, that's who it is. I posted it up on Instagram if anyone wants to see it, but they all made their way down. And I thought, what a proud moment. It's interesting. And tell me if I'm off on this, because here's what struck me. These young women were going to the White House to stand up for something that the older women who fought for Title IX won't do themselves.
Yeah. Independent Women's Forum, and I'm so proud to work with IWF as a director. We were one of the only groups to highlight this as an issue well before anyone brought it up. Riley Gaines, we kind of found her and gave her a platform to share her story. And as a result, we've had hundreds of women come to us. And so in the backdrop of that video is our CEO, Heather Higgins. In the backdrop are a lot of our comms people who are former female athletes, and a lot of our ambassadors who've been sharing their story. So I love that President Trump has formalized what we've been doing for years on this issue, which is pushing for legislative changes so that, a next president doesn't overdo President Trump's executive order, and also suing hospitals, suing everyone that we needed to raise this as a national issue, bring it into the public discourse, because no one believed that this was really happening, 5-6 years ago. And now here we are. And so I do think this is a watershed moment, not just for women in sports. This bleeds over into women in any public space, including private prisons, where we are telling the stories of female prisoners who are forced to live in confines of violent men pretending to be women who are sexual predators, telling those stories, elevating this as an issue, suing where that needs to happen, and then passing legislation in close to a dozen states now to ensure at the state level that this is happening. The corollary is DEI as well. We are seeing large corporations also backing off on the DEI because they recognize the Supreme Court said, no, affirmative action is rightly dead. It's unconstitutional, in addition to it being biased and unfair. And so this is a really important moment. It's a proud moment for me working for an organization that is fighting to protect women, but also just to protect the rights of every person, not just when it comes to women and sports, but also every person to fairly have access to opportunities, regardless of their skin color, their gender, or who they sleep with.
Yeah, kudos to all the work that you guys do at the Independent Women's Forum. Heather Higgins and others there have really led the way on this. The one thing that excited me about this panel, and first of all, I always love the panel discussions because it's so much more interactive and fun. But we're all either in the messaging communications world, Patrice, what she does, but then also what she does on the radio, and then obviously both Tim and Steve. And Tim, one of the things that has really impressed me, and I want you to, like, as a comms director, is the way that this White House has pushed back effectively. Like, I would yell at the podium and try to out a reporter and probably didn't look the best, right? But these guys are doing it with a much more surgical way. So they put out, like, they have a Twitter handle now pushing back. Then they put out this thing the other day, like literally from an official White House standpoint, about the hoax machine keeps running. And this says the onslaught of fake news is coming at a record speed. And then they basically would put out stuff that says, like, hoax. Holding government agencies such as USAID accountable for their spending is, quote, the beginning of a dictatorship, looks like, says Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, implied the Secretary of State was lying about the waste, fraud, and abuse. And then they put fact with hyperlinks to U.S. taxpayer money, saving all this money through DEI. And then they did another one about multiple media outlets reporting that operatives from DOJ attempted to gain access to secure environments. And they're like, there's nothing secure about this. They're trying to imply something is false. The broader point that I'm making, Tim Murtaugh, is that this White House isn't just sort of announcing things. They're doing a really effective job at fighting back on the false narratives in a way that, I'll be blunt, we didn't do in the first term.
Yeah, they are doing that. And you mentioned Chris Murphy's name there, one of the senators from Connecticut. And I got to say, the purest form of love can be found in the relationship between Chris Murphy and a camera. I mean, that guy, all he does, if you look at his feed on X, all he ever talks about is a TV hit that he just did or one that he's about to do. And then he's at the end of the day and he goes, hey, I'm going to be live on Instagram here now for the next 6 hours. I mean, this guy, a camera is like oxygen for that guy. He just personally offends me in that way. I wanted to get that in. But you're right. This White House has shown that they're just not going to take it. And I was a senior advisor on the 2024 campaign. And I spent the last 3.5 months of the campaign on the ground in West Palm Beach. And the attitude,
I feel so bad for you. I don't know.
Yeah, it was rough duty, man.
How did you do it?
It was hard. The weather was.
Cortes is looking at you, going, "Yeah, I was in Arlington, Virginia." Dude. Like,
well, my wife and children were gracious enough to let me go serve. Yeah. But so the attitude of the campaign has carried over into the White House, and I'll give you another example. That's off the topic a little bit, and it's regarding the crackdown on illegal aliens and the deportations that have started. And I think everyone probably saw the video that Selena Gomez posted, and she's got, 66 million followers on X and like 350 million followers on Instagram, which is insane. And she had this ugly crying video where she's crying about the people getting deported and her people, and she doesn't know what to do. And she subsequently deleted it. But the White House wasn't going to take it. And they went and did their own video interviews with 3 angel moms, which are women who have lost children to the border crisis. And collectively, they're known as a group as angel moms. And they had a message right back to Selena Gomez that said, you're crying for the wrong people. My son died of a fentanyl overdose, or my son was murdered by an illegal alien. My daughter was raped and killed by an illegal. You're crying for the wrong people. And then Rolling Stone, if Rolling Stone is upset about you as a Republican, you are doing exactly the right things, right? Rolling Stone had a story that said that the White House has weaponized the grief of these women. Seriously, as though Selena Gomez didn't turn on the waterworks and try to weaponize her own acting abilities, such as they might be, to try to push back on that in a policy direction. But Rolling Stone sees it as, they've weaponized. That means that the White House is pushing back, and the radical leftists in the media, that they just don't like it. And the thing is, the left and the media keep handing the Trump White House these issues. These are like 80-20 issues. These are slam dunk. Most Democrats agree with what Trump is doing. Right. But this is just further proof that the radical left has control of that entire party. And so even reasonable Democrats feel like they have to, in a knee-jerk way, be against whatever it is that Trump is doing, even if 80% of the country is behind it.
Tim, I'd be curious, as a communications expert, on your view on this, in terms of our side using communications, using media, particularly alternative and new media, in a way more effective way than we used to. It seems to me that it kind of makes sense, though, that let's face it, in the scope of American history, the America First movement is still very, very young, right? And in 2016, when we won, when Sean and others pulled off one of the most amazing victories in American political history, the movement was a baby. I mean, it was a newborn. But now we are growing in importance and persuasion and power, and the coalition is becoming far broader. We have way more institutional skill within the movement. So doesn't it sort of make sense that we're getting better? We should be getting better. And that's a consequence of being a still young movement.
Yeah, it is. It's a young movement, but it's also agile, and I think it has been quick to take advantage of the new media. Like everyone credits the Trump campaign's effort to try to capitalize on podcasts and the popularity of podcasts. Joe Rogan, for example, Theo Vaughn, so many different podcasts, the Milk Boys that President Trump appeared on during the campaign, hugely influential to the point now that we're now 4 months after the election, and they're still talking about how Kamala Harris and those folks dropped the ball and didn't do the podcasts exactly right. So yeah, I mean, I think it is a relatively new movement. We're only about 10 years into this, I guess, if you count 2015 as the start date. But there's no end in sight, because it's a very populist movement. And you talk about the coalition that built, that I know we'll get into probably talking about Gaza and all that, but the coalition that Trump built in 2024, which includes union workers, the regular conservatives, MAGA Republicans, the America First movement, and then he made inroads into the Black community, the Latino community. He won white women. He made great inroads into the Jewish community, and in places like Dearborn, Michigan, he also won the Muslim community. He won both sides of the Gaza conflict in this country. It's astounding the coalition that he built.
Can I just tack on there? I think an element that I've seen with the Trump administration, the campaign, and that the Republican establishments they didn't pick up until recently, but it's the impact and the power of the storyteller. When President Trump is elevating, as you just mentioned, the moms who lost their children to illegal immigrants in this country, violent criminals. That story tells more than 500 white papers out of your favorite conservative think tank. It's the stories that have really captured both the attention of Americans, but also it's been a great denial to the left. The left has always been great about finding the bleeding heart story, the person who, is going to lose who's going to lose their life if they don't get enough more food stamps, and so it's been refreshing to see President Trump, whether it's the young ladies yesterday or just in every single campaign rally, there's some face that he's able to elevate and make the forefront of the issues, so that then you can come around on the policy side and say, yeah, this is the right policy. This is the data that supports it. But really, this is about helping an individual. And I think that's been a huge way to bridge and really draw people into this movement who are not going to be moved by numbers and policy papers and coherent, arguments. Not coherent arguments, but data-driven points. They want to know who is affected. Does that resonate with them? And then can they see themselves being helped by what is being offered to them?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
before we,
I'm going to pick up on something that Patrice just said. When I started out life as a local TV reporter, and the assignment editor would always say, "Go, here's a national story off the AP wire. Go put a face on it." And we would go out in the community and try to find somebody locally who could basically personify whatever this national story was. At the time, there was like the smoking bans in restaurants were coming around, right? First time. And so you go out and find somebody at a restaurant who thinks banning smoking is a good idea, put them on TV. Now you've localized the story. You've put a face on it. And that's exactly what this White House is doing.
Guys, I mentioned, Steve, like the cutting the fat in government. I think going back to our communications discussion, what I love about what they're doing is it's visual. And I think it was Tim that mentioned this, it's indefensible. Who's going to defend? Who wants to defend $70,000 for a DEI musical in Ireland? Like, tell me, like, who? So to me, I love the way they're doing this because the Democrats have no response. Do you want to get out there? Name me the Democrat that wants to go out and say, listen, 70 grand a year tax dollars for a DEI musical in Ireland, or 2.5 or $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia are critical to our national security and our foreign policy.
Yes. And by the way, my father from Colombia, legal immigrant from Colombia, he's long passed away, but I think he'd be pretty irate to know that his American tax dollars were going to fund toxic cultural pollution in his homeland of Colombia. But to the bigger point here, you're so correct that it's important to be specific rather than just theoretical, particularly when you're talking about giant numbers, which are always involved with the federal budget. For most people, right, if they're not particularly quantitative, or if they don't follow budget issues closely, which the vast majority of people don't, and their eyes gloss over when they hear billions and trillions. If you make it tangible and if you make it real with very specific examples, particularly if you can put a visual on it, then it becomes far more effective at convincing people, hey, this is wrong, this needs to change. And I would also add this part, particularly connected back to their own life in that. What I mean by that, Sean, is it's not just that it's a waste of money. That's terrible. And not only are we funding leftist secular humanist garbage all over the world, here and abroad, that's terrible. But also, and nearly every American will agree with this if this point is made to them persuasively, what it's also doing is spending money we don't have, spending money that we are borrowing, which means interest rates rise, which means inflation soars, which means your trip to the grocery, at least in part, is so anxiety ridden because of this kind of insanely wasteful spending all over the world. And when we make it that tangible, I think it really, really matters to folks, and it will really hit home with a lot of voters who may not be all that ideologically aligned with us, at least yet. However, people who are extremely stressed, and middle-class Americans, and we know this from polling, middle-class Americans are unbelievably stressed. The Biden economic handoff to Trump was dismal, especially for middle-income Americans. When we can correctly attribute that stress to these kinds of wasteful policies, then I think we have a far better chance of eliminating that very waste.
Patrice, the thing that I have equally been blown away is the weakness of the Democrats' response. I mean, like, I actually thought they'd come out and be like, here's the programs this is affecting. I mean, exactly how Tim described this. They'd find faces. They'd personalize this. This is little Bobby. He gets this stuff from USAID and whatever. And instead, let me show you how they're responding, because it's, to me, mind-blowing.
We will win. 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 We won't rest. We won't rest. We won't rest.
I literally, at some point, I feel like this is if the Kansas City Chiefs or the Philadelphia Eagles took the field this weekend and like a Pop Warner football team came on and they'd be like, are you serious? This is what you want to fight us? I mean, play us against? Like, that's, if you're a Democratic donor or this new wonder kid that's the chair of the DNC, you got to be like, oh God, I didn't realize this is all I got. I mean, that's pathetic.
I mean, did you see that democracy sign they dusted off from the Kamala Harris campaign? This is what happens when you are not prepared to lose. And they didn't think that they were going to lose somehow a couple of months ago. And so here they are trying to put out their best messengers out there who all have made quite a good amount of money using the taxpayer-funded system that I think DOJ is starting to expose right now. So they don't have a good argument. We heard a lot of people are going to die. Well, how is that going to be the case? The White House then said, no, all of the programs that are feeding people, that are ensuring life-saving medicine is still going to continue. We're just going to take a look at all the other funding programs. And some of the examples you gave are great. But I think there's now going to be, after we figure out all of the waste and the fraud, I think the next step then needs to be, what are the reforms and the incentives that are in Washington federal agencies to say, you know what, your promotion is going to hinge on how much money you get out of the door, not the outcomes of the programs that you claim to be funding. And so very often you have this perverse incentive system where, these federal bureaucrats are trying to shovel money out because they want their budgets to be as much or greater the next time around. Contracting has no reason to want to negotiate and have actual open RFP proposal competitions when they need to buy military equipment or other things. They just take whatever their favorite contractor gives them. We need to change now the incentive systems and the models, what these federal agencies are working under. That is going to be, I think, a harder battle to fight.
I'll put it up on the screen for everyone to see, but I mean, so if you're listening, take a look at this on video. I mean, the amount of money that was wasted across government on DEI is actually astounding. And it makes me wonder, like, as a guy who's been in and out of government, what else is there? Like, what else are you guys like doing every year that's 80,000 or 100,000 or God forbid $1 million? Because I know that's not real money in Washington. But I just am like, if you're that careless with DEI money, what else are you careless with? Because that to me is a big thing.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.